What if you could sell gift cards globally with just a few API calls? Today, I'll show you how with Reloadly. Hello and welcome. My name is Junaid Maqsood and I'm super excited to be back, bringing you this time with Reloadly's amazing, powerful gift cards API. This is going to be a multi-video series where we'll go step by step with everything you need to know from the basics all the way to the real-world examples. This series is packed with hands-on demos, clear code examples, and practical tips that you can use in your production environment. So sit back, grab a coffee, relax, and let's get right into it. In this video, we're covering the first and most important step, that's generating your access token. Before you can browse products or place an order, you need to authenticate your app using the Reloadly's authentication flow. By the end of this video, you'll know how to generate tokens for both environments and how to securely use them. Reloadly uses Auth 2.0 client credential flow, which means your application authenticates using two values, the client ID and the client secret. These two are used to request an access token, which is then required in every subsequent API call. Without this token, the API will reject any call. The access token is short-lived, meaning your backend should refresh it automatically as per requirement. Reloadly uses two environments. Sandbox, that's your testing playground. It uses virtual balance and lets you experiment safely. Production is the live environment where actual transactions happen. Keys from one environment should never be used in another one. You should always generate separate keys, separate access tokens, and secure them separately. Right now, I'm on the Reloadly documentation page. You can see I'm on the gift card and I'm on the introduction page. Let's go to the quick start. So in order to get started, you'll need a Reloadly account if you don't have already one. You'll need to fund your test wallet if you're on the sandbox environment. If you're on the production environment, you'll need to fund that wallet as well. And then from the dashboard, we will retrieve the client ID and the client secret, which we'll then use in our application to generate the access token. On the documentation, you can see they provide you with this handy quick curl request. It's a simple post request to the authentication URL, and it's taking in the client ID, client secret. The grant type will always be client credentials, and the audience that basically tells us which environment you're generating the access token for. So if it's a sandbox environment, you'll put the sandbox audience. If it's the production environment, you'll put the production environment. We'll come back to this call and what those audiences are in just a bit. On the documentation, you'll also see the response that we'll get from this curl request. So in the response, we're getting the access token, the scope, the type, which is the bearer token, and when the access token expires. So we also have an expiry in that tells you from now how many time later it will actually expire. Also, before moving ahead, in the documentation page, you can navigate over to the API and SDK and then go in gift card API reference. This will open a new documentation page that contains all the API references for the gift card API. So here we have all the details on what endpoints are available, and we also have various code examples for different languages. So if you're writing a code in Python, we have an example for that, how the flow would look like for C#, Java, Go, and so on. Also on the top, you'll notice we have two base URLs. One is the base URL for the production one, so it's giftcards.reloadly.com, and the other one is the base URL for the sandbox, which is giftcard-sandbox.reloadly.com. These are also the audiences that you'll send on the authentication API. So we'll go over that in a bit as well. So you can see that we have what the request parameters are available for us, what the response is like. So if it's a 200, what parameters we can just expect from the API to respond to us. And if it's a failure, it will tell us what the error will look like. So any details, I'll leave the link to both documentations in the description below, so you can study the documentation in details. It's always a good idea to study this. So for the next step, I'll navigate into my dashboard where I'll show you where you can find the client ID and the client secret to generate the access token. Okay, so right now I'm logged into the Reloadly's dashboard. I'm currently on the sandbox environment. You can verify that with this sandbox checkbox that's on the top right corner of the top bar. So first of all, what you need to do is you'll need to fund your sandbox wallet as well. So how you can do that is you can click on the recharge wallet, and then you can add a bank card if you haven't already added one. And then here you can add a test bank card. So first of all, I'll choose the country. Let's select Canada, Ontario. So I'm just adding some dummy values here. And then for the card number, you will enter 4242, all 42s. For the expiry, it just needs to be ahead of the current date, and you can enter anything in CVB. So as we are on the sandbox environment, this is a test environment that's created for you. So you can play with the API while you're doing development. You'll add a test card here. So it's not a real transaction, it's just a test card. So I'll add an email, and we'll just add any, let's add Pakistan. It doesn't really matter. I'll click submit. Okay, so now that the card is added, let's recharge with this card. I'll select the card that I've added. I'll add any amount. Let's add $100. Click next. And there we go. The test balance has been added to our test account. Now, in order to obtain the client ID and client secret, we will go in the developers section. Here we have the API keys, we have the API client ID and the API client secret. We'll need both of these to generate the access token, which we will then use in all the API calls. This access token tells the Reloadly API which account we're using, what are the details, so that they can process the transactions or provide us relevant details based on our account configuration. So let's copy these and save them. We'll need those later. So in order to copy the client ID, it's quite straightforward. You can click on the copy button, it's copied. But for the client secret, when we click on copy, it will ask us to verify that we are the owner of this account. So we'll receive a verification code via email, or we can receive the verification code via SMS. So let me go through that process as well. So I'll receive via email, and let me just check the email. Now that I have the code, let me just paste that in there. Click next, and there we go. We are now able to reveal the client secret and copy that information as well. It's very important to keep your client secret and client ID very safe. So you can save them as environment variable on the server, or you can use some kind of keychain manager or a security keys manager, asset manager, something like that. So these keys are safe. It's not recommended to comment these on your code base or anything that's somewhat publicly available, as if anyone gains access to these keys, they can use the API to create transactions from your account. So if for any reason you think your access keys have been compromised, or you did a bad practice or something like that, and now you want to safeguard your account, you can always click the rotate client secret button to rotate the client secret. So it will revoke the old keys and it will provide you with new keys. You will then need to replace them in your code base anywhere. If you've set up environment variables, you will need to replace those there as well. So now that that part is covered, we have access to our client ID and client secret. Next, I'll switch to Postman, where I'll show you how to create the API call to get the access token. So now I'm in Postman. I will import the sample API request. So this is the same API request that I showed you for curl that was available on the main documentation page. So it has pre-filled the URL. So this is the authentication URL. It's a post request. And if we go into the headers, we are sending content type as application JSON, so that the server knows that we're communicating with via the JSON, and we're expecting a JSON response as well. So in the body, we'll see that we need client ID, client secret. So we've already copied those. So let me just paste those here. So now that we have the client ID and the client secret, the cron type, it's always going to be client credential. And for the audience, it is pre-filled with the sandbox audience. So it's giftcards-sandbox.reloadly.com. And we also copied the API keys, client ID, client secret for the sandbox environment. So let's send the API request. And there we go. We have received a successful response with the access token. So we have the access token, the scope, when that access token will expire, and the token type is bearer. So in order to demo how you'll use this access token, I'm going to just go to the documentation. Let me just switch the screen. So now I'm on the documentation page. This is the curl request that we used to generate the access token. And if I scroll down, we have the making a purchase and other endpoints. I'm just going to make a simple balance call request. So the easier way would be to go into the gift cards API reference and just copy the curl request for the view balance endpoint. So this is the view balance for the we want for the sandbox environment. So this is the curl request. Let me just copy this. I will go back to Postman and I'm just going to paste that curl request. So in the auth token request, we received the access token. I'm just going to copy that. And here in headers, we have authorization, bearer, and then we'll paste in our access token. And it's a simple GET request. So let's just execute. And there you see, we received a successful response with our balance. So again, this is the test environment. So it's telling us what the wallet balance is for our test environment wallet. So one thing you should always note that if I change the audience on the token, let's say I change the audience to the production audience. So this is the production audience, and my client ID and client secret are for the test environment. So if I try to create a token via that, it will tell me the access denied, that we're not, this is not the right audience we're trying to generate. So it's failing. So you should always make sure that your client ID and client secret match the audience for the environment on which you want to generate the access token for, as the base URL for all subsequent API calls will also change. So this is the base URL for the sandbox environment. If I was to send this call on the production, the base URL would look like this. And this is the API endpoint. So this is for the balance endpoint, we are on account/balance. So now that I've demoed how you can use the client ID, client secret to generate the access token, how you can then use the access token. Next up, what I want to do is I'll switch to a code editor and we'll deep dive into an actual coding example where I'll show you a simple Node.js based Express application where in the backend we'll do the API call to generate the access token, and then we'll do the same practice. We'll use the access token to get the balance from the balance endpoint. So see you in a bit. Okay, so now we are back. I'm using Cursor. You can use VS Code or any preferred code editor. I've set up the repo as there's a simple backend folder which contains a simple Express.js based application, and there's a front-end folder for the simple React.js application. So we'll use that in later videos where I'll show you what the front-end side of the project will look like. Ideally, you'll only interact with the Reloadly API on the backend side of your application. And it's as I mentioned before, it's very important to keep the client ID and client secret safe. So in the example, what I've done is I've created an env file and I've put the client ID and client secret here. These are these keys for the sandbox environment. These are not production keys. And I've also added the Reloadly audience as the sandbox so that I can on the fly I can change these values based on what the environment of my application is. And I've specified the port as 3000 where the API service will be running. So apart from that, we have a server.js file. This is I've set up a basic Express.js server. So we're initializing the Express.js server and we only have one route at the moment. That's the /API. And I'm sending that to the API router. And if I check the API router file, at the moment, we only have a /balance endpoint, and we'll add the code here to get the balance from the Reloadly API. I've also created a helpers Reloadly service. So you can basically, this is just for the demo purposes. You'll do this differently based on what your application needs are, how the architecture is for your application. But for the demo purposes, I've just created a generate token function that does the API request to the auth URL. It sends in the client ID, client secret, and the audience, and I'm retrieving that information from the environment variable. And if the response is successful, then I'm caching the token and when that token expires. So if there's an error, I'll just throw the error back. So ideally, you'll cache the token, access token, in some kind of a caching service like Redis or something based on your application environment. I'm just saving here on the file level. So there is also a get token function that I've created, which checks if there is a token available, and if that token is not expired yet, then it'll return the cache token. If that token is already expired, it will generate a new token for me. There's also a helper make request function. So that one takes the base URL from the environment if it's set. If it's not set, then it's defaulting to the sandbox environment base URL. We saw this base URL in the documentation as well a few moments back. And then based on what the endpoint I'm trying to call, it will make a get request to that endpoint and use the token from this get token function and will respond with the data. So it's a simple structure that I've created so that we can reuse that same code again and again as per requirement. So if I navigate back to the API endpoint where we were going to do the balance call, I will do const response equals to await make request. I'll get that helper function and I'll call the endpoint accounts / balance, which was the endpoint that we saw while we were doing the postman request. So now if the balance is available, I'm just going to return the whatever the balance is. If the API fails, I'll catch the error and respond in a JSON error format. So let's run the backend service, npm start, and the backend service is running on the 3000 port. Let's open that. So the route was, so we were going /API and then /balance. So /API and then /balance. Let's execute that. And there we go. We got the successful response in our application. So here an example scenario would be that you can create some kind of a cron job or a queue processor where every day you're checking the balance, and if it goes below a certain threshold, you want to initiate a process to generate emails to your account manager or something like that, so that you can top up the account or do something. But that was the whole example. We deep dived into the coding example where we saw how we were generating the token and how we can use that token in our coding example to basically simply get the balance at the moment. In the later videos, we'll deep dive into different aspects of the API. Great. So now that we have the first step taken care of and we know how to generate the access token for different environments and where to find the client ID and client secret. In the next video, I'll show you the different brands and categories and countries that are available via the Reloadly API and how you can use them to filter through the products. And if you stick to the very end of the series, I have a special tutorial for all those vibe coders out there. And I'll show you how easy it is to integrate the Reloadly API documentation right into your AI agent so that your AI can start doing the coding for you or can verify the integration that you've already done. So see you in the next one.